The air in the Galactic Council chamber was tense, the usual hum of quiet discussions replaced by an unnatural silence. Representatives of hundreds of species filled the vast hall, their gazes locked on the center podium where a holographic display flickered to life. It showed a devastated colony, once a thriving human settlement, now little more than smoldering ruins. Above it, remnants of shattered starships drifted in silence, torn apart by a brutal and unprovoked assault. A deep, gravelly voice cut through the silence. The attack was swift and decisive. The human colony of Eden Prime has been reduced to nothing. The Zorzel have claimed victory. Vacheron, the Zorzel ambassador, leaned forward, his chitinous fingers tapping against the table in feigned indifference. As it should be, he declared, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. The humans have grown too bold. Their expansion into our sectors was unacceptable. We have corrected that mistake. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some nodded in agreement, though others shifted uneasily in their seats. The Zorzel were a known warrior race, aggressive and proud, but even they had never attacked a Galactic Council-recognized species without provocation. The humans had been expanding, yes, but through diplomacy, trade, and strategic alliances, not conquest. Zaltar, an elder statesman of the Carthuan Dominion, let out a slow breath, his reptilian eyes narrowing. He had seen many wars in his time, and this felt different. Dangerous. His voice, though soft, carried weight. And did you consider, even for a moment, what you have just unleashed? Vacheron scoffed. Unleashed? What could a young race like humanity possibly do? Their fleets are limited, their numbers insignificant. We have crushed their colony, and if necessary, we will crush more. Their place in this galaxy will be as it should, beneath us. A quiet chuckle echoed from the far end of the table. All eyes turned to the human delegation. Ambassador Elaine Carter sat composed, her expression unreadable. The amusement in her voice, however, was unmistakable. Beneath you? She tilted her head slightly. Tell me, Vacheron, do you truly believe this is over? A flicker of uncertainty crossed the Zorzel's face, but he quickly buried it beneath arrogance. What more can they do? Their colony is lost, their forces are outmatched. If they retaliate, we will annihilate them. Carter exhaled softly, as if disappointed. You don't understand, she said, shaking her head. You think this was a battle. It wasn't. It was an invitation. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The implications of her words hung in the air like a storm about to break. The humans had not surrendered. They had not even considered it. Zaltar tapped his claw against the table. Tell me, Ambassador, how will your people respond? Carter met his gaze, the hint of a smile playing on her lips. We have a saying back home, she said evenly. Do no harm, but take no shit. Vacheron snarled, but Carter continued without acknowledging him. We extended our hand in peace. You spat in it. You didn't just attack a colony, you declared war. And the thing about humanity is, we don't lose wars. A council member from the Verity Dominion, a race of scholars and strategists, leaned forward, his tendrils twitching in curiosity. Statistically, no empire can remain undefeated forever. Even the greatest must fall eventually. Carter's smile widened. Oh, we've taken our hits. Lost battles. Lost people. But we don't break. We learn. We adapt. And when we strike back, we make damn sure it never happens again. The chamber erupted in debate. Some called for immediate sanctions against the Zorzel, others insisted that humanity should seek peace before further escalation. The Zorzel, however, remained unmoved, their arrogance unwavering. Zaltar, ever the observer, noticed a subtle change in the air. The humans were not pleading their case. They were not asking for aid or negotiation. They were waiting. Waiting for something inevitable. He turned back to Carter, voice lowered. You already know what your people are going to do, don't you? Carter didn't answer immediately. She simply reached forward, tapped a command into her data pad, and brought up a new holographic display. It was a live feed, timestamped just minutes ago. The Zorzel fleet that had devastated Eden Prime? It was gone. A gasp rippled through the assembly as they watched the footage. Hulking warships, once the pride of the Zorzel armada, reduced to debris. Fires still burned in the vacuum of space, flickering in eerie silence. There was no great battle, no drawn-out war, just the aftermath of a single, devastating counterstrike. Vacheron shot to his feet, mandibles clicking in fury. Impossible! Our fleet was decimated. Carter finished for him, voice calm. Your commanders thought they were clever, but they made a fatal mistake. They assumed we would respond the way their past enemies did, slowly, diplomatically, timidly. She leaned forward. We are not timid. The council chamber fell deathly silent. Even those who had been skeptical of humanity moments ago now regarded them with newfound respect and fear. Carter sighed, almost regretfully. We didn't want this, she said, glancing briefly towards Zaltar. But your people forced our hand. And now, we are coming. Not to negotiate. Not to ask for terms. But to make sure this never happens again. She stood, adjusting her uniform. You thought wiping out a colony would send a message. She met Vacheron's gaze, eyes cold. Well, we received it loud and clear. With that, she turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Zaltar exhaled, glancing around at the stunned faces of his fellow council members. He had tried to warn them. Now, all they could do was watch what came next. He closed his eyes briefly and muttered under his breath. You should have left them alone. The Zorzel had never known fear. Their species was born in conflict, their history written in the blood of weaker civilizations. Every war waged ended the same, total subjugation, a new world added to their empire. Victory was not a possibility, it was an expectation. And so, when they struck Eden Prime, they did not question their success. To them, it was just another conquest. Admiral Xarn stood at the bridge of his warship, surveying the destruction through the viewport. The colony burned beneath him, its cities reduced to rubble, its people either dead or dying. The Zorzel fleet drifted above the ruined world, basking in their dominance. Pathetic, Xarn muttered, watching the last human distress signals flicker out. They fall like all the others. His second-in-command, Commander Vresh, clicked his mandibles in agreement. They had no orbital defenses. No real fleet presence. If this is humanity's strength, they are weaker than the Council claims. Xarn's eyes gleamed with confidence. Then we strike again. We push further before they can recover. Their military is untested. If they retaliate, we will crush them before they gain momentum. He turned to his communications officer. Send a transmission to High Command. Inform them that the humans are broken. The officer obeyed, but something in the data feed caught his attention. His mandibles twitched. Sir, we lost contact with 2 scout ships near the colony's outer orbit. No distress calls, just silence. Xarn barely reacted. Probably human survivors lashing out in desperation. They are doomed regardless. But then another report came in. Then another. One by one, outer patrol ships disappeared. There were no explosions, no visible attacks. Just static, as if they had been erased from existence. A deep unease settled over the bridge. Vresh turned toward Xarn, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Sir, something is wrong. Before Xarn could reply, the ship's alarms blared. Incoming projectile detected! The tactical officer's voice was sharp with alarm. Velocity, impossibly fast! Xarn spun to the viewport just in time to see a streak of light pierce the void. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't a conventional weapon. It was something else. And it moved like a predator. The moment it struck one of their cruisers, the ship folded in on itself. There was no explosion, just sudden, absolute destruction. 1 second, a warship. The next, a crumpled mass of twisted metal, as if space itself had clenched its fist around it. A second projectile followed, then a third. More Zorzel ships were torn apart in an instant, their once mighty fleet falling to something they couldn't even see. Panic erupted across the bridge. Where is the enemy? Vresh demanded, his voice rising. The sensors returned nothing. No heat signatures. No visible fleet. Just the overwhelming presence of something unseen, something hunting them. Then the first transmission arrived. A voice, calm and controlled, crackled through their channels. Not a demand. Not a warning. Just a simple statement. Asterisk. You should have left us alone. Asterisk. Silence fell over the bridge. Kazan's mandibles twitched in fury, but beneath it, something else stirred, a feeling unfamiliar to him. Dread. Find them! He bellowed. All ships fire at will! Their fleet lashed out in every direction, energy bolts streaking across the void. But they hit nothing. The darkness itself seemed to shift, eluding their weapons. Then, the real slaughter began. One by one, the Zorzel ships went dark. Systems shut down. Crews suffocated in the vacuum as life support failed. Marines reported shadows moving through the corridors, unseen enemies tearing through them in silence. Xarn gritted his teeth. Boarding parties? How? No breaches had been detected. No ships had docked. And yet, his warriors were dying. A frantic voice broke through the command channel. They're inside! We don't. The message cut off in a burst of static. Xarn's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. How are they doing this? Then came the final revelation. The sensor officer's voice trembled as he spoke. Sir, the humans never left. Xarn froze. Explain. The officer's hands shook as he brought up a hidden data feed. They were here the whole time. They didn't retreat. They didn't flee. They waited. They hid in the debris, in the sensor blind spots, in the cold void where our scanners wouldn't detect them. He swallowed. They've been hunting us. A chill ran through Xarn's spine. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't retaliation. This was calculated. The next attack was surgical. Human assault teams, clad in exosuits designed for silent warfare, moved through the dying ships, clearing them deck by deck. They didn't rush. They didn't make mistakes. They were methodical. One Zorzel soldier tried to surrender. The humans shot him mid-sentence. Xarn's mind raced. No species fought like this. No species waited for the perfect moment to strike, watching as their enemies grew comfortable before obliterating them in silence. This wasn't war. This was annihilation. He turned to Vresh. We must retreat. Now. Vresh hesitated. But High Command. High Command is dead. Xarn snapped. We must warn the others. He turned toward the comms officer. Send the order. Full withdrawal. The officer's claws hovered over the controls, but then he hesitated. His breathing was erratic, his eyes wide with terror. Xarn growled. Do it! The officer turned slowly. His hands moved unnaturally, his posture stiff. His mandibles opened, and a human voice came through instead. Asterisk. There's no one left to order. Asterisk. Xarn's blood ran cold. A sharp pain lanced through his chest. He looked down. A human combat knife, serrated and wet, was buried in his exoskeleton. Behind him, in the uniform of his own crew, stood a human operative, face emotionless. Xarn tried to speak, but his lungs filled with liquid. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the operative's gaze, calm, patient, and utterly without mercy. The Zorzel fleet was no more. The war had ended before it had even begun. The Zorzel homeworld had never known war. For centuries, their fleets had crushed all opposition before conflict could ever reach their own skies. Their generals spoke of dominance, of their species' unchallenged rule, of the unshakable foundation of their empire. They believed war was something that happened elsewhere. Something that happened to others. Then the sky fell. It began with silence. No grand invasion fleet appeared in orbit. No declarations of war echoed across their channels. Only a single message arrived, transmitted directly to the Zorzel High Command. Asterisk. You killed our people. Now we end this. Asterisk. Then every satellite, every communication relay, every orbital defense platform shut down. Panic spread like wildfire. High Command barked orders, but their transmissions were nothing but static. Their warships, once symbols of power, floated uselessly in the void, their systems frozen by an unseen force. The greatest fleet the Zorzel had ever built, locked in place like prey caught in a hunter's trap. Then came the strikes. A ship vanished. One moment, it was part of the defensive formation. The next, it was gone, torn apart in utter silence. No explosions. No debris. Just empty space where something massive had once been. Then another. And another. The few Zorzel vessels still able to move fired blindly into the darkness, trying to hit something. Anything. Their shots burned across the void, finding no target. A whisper came through the static. You don't see us. But we see you. Terror gripped the Zorzel commanders. This was not war. This was not battle. This was eradication. The assault moved to the surface. The first sign of attack was the sudden loss of power across the capital city. Buildings that had stood illuminated for centuries flickered into blackness. The air defenses, automated turrets capable of targeting a mosquito from miles away, fell silent. Then, the screams began. The humans moved through the city like ghosts. The Zorzel warriors, bred for combat, fired wildly at shadows. None of their weapons mattered. The first ones to fall were the officers, then the chain of command, then entire battalions. Civilians hid in their homes, trembling, waiting for the inevitable. But the humans didn't slaughter indiscriminately. They weren't here to burn the planet. They were here to dismantle an empire. One by one, key locations were hit with terrifying precision. The Central War archives were erased, centuries of military strategy, wiped from existence. The cloning facilities that ensured a steady supply of Zorzel soldiers were reduced to ruins before reinforcements could even deploy. The genetic databanks, the vaults that housed the Empire's most valuable research, vanished in an instant, reduced to scorched craters. The High Command bunker, buried beneath miles of reinforced alloy, was supposed to be impenetrable. It had never been breached in all of Zorzel history. It took the humans 6 minutes. No one knew how they got in. The automated defenses never activated. The guards outside never even fired a shot. But when the council doors were forced open, the ruling warlords found themselves staring at soldiers clad in black armor, weapons raised, expressions unreadable. One of the humans stepped forward, voice calm, emotionless. You thought we would beg? One of the warlords snarled, mandibles clicking in defiance. If you are here to demand surrender, you will not. A single gunshot silenced him. His body collapsed before he could finish his sentence. The human soldier lowered his weapon. This is not a negotiation. The remaining warlords trembled. For the first time in their history, the Zorzel had nothing to say. Across the planet, the last remnants of the Zorzel military collapsed. Their warriors, bred to believe in their own invincibility, surrendered without another fight. Their empire, once vast and unchallenged, crumbled in the span of a single night. And then, just as quickly as they had come, the humans were gone. No cities were occupied. No new rulers were installed. No demands were made. They had sent a message. And that message was received. The Galactic Council convened in a state of unprecedented crisis. The chamber, usually a place of measured diplomacy and strategic maneuvering, now felt like the center of a storm. Delegates from every major species sat in stunned silence, the weight of the recent events pressing down on them like a physical force. The Zorzel were finished. Not defeated. Not occupied. Erased. Their once mighty empire, feared for centuries, was now little more than a cautionary tale. The survivors who managed to flee before the collapse arrived in council space as broken creatures. Their arrogance had been stripped away, their confidence shattered beyond repair. Those who had ruled with iron claws now spoke in whispers, eyes darting at shadows, afraid that humanity had followed them even here. For the first time in history, a war had been lost before anyone else even had time to react. Ambassador Zaltar, one of the oldest voices in the council, was the first to speak. His reptilian features remained composed, but there was something in his tone, something that had never been there before. Fear. We have underestimated them. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the chamber. We assumed that because they were young, they were weak. We assumed that because they spoke of peace, they were incapable of war. We assumed, and we were wrong. Silence followed his words. No one dared to argue. On the far end of the chamber, Ambassador Elaine Carter sat unmoving. The human delegation had remained silent since their arrival, answering no questions, offering no explanations. They had done nothing to defend their actions, nothing to justify their response. They hadn't needed to. The Zorzel had fired the first shot. The humans had fired the last. Finally, another voice broke the silence. A Verity diplomat, his species known for their careful calculations and deep strategic insight, leaned forward. His tendrils shifted uneasily, a rare sign of distress. This cannot be ignored, he said slowly. The destruction of an entire empire, it changes the balance of the galaxy. Carter finally stirred. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Does it? The question sent a ripple through the chamber. The Verity hesitated. You wiped out one of the largest military forces in existence within days. And you expect the rest of us to believe this changes nothing? Carter leaned back slightly, exhaling as if she had grown tired of the conversation. We didn't wipe out the Zorzel, she corrected. We removed a problem. A threat that refused to listen. If you want to call that a change in balance, that's your perspective. But from where I stand, nothing is different. Zaltar studied her carefully. Nothing is different, he echoed. Even though every species in this chamber now knows exactly what you're capable of. Carter met his gaze without hesitation. We were always capable of it, she said simply. The only thing that changed is that now you know. The chamber fell into uneasy quiet once again. For years, the Galactic Council had treated humanity as an upstart race, a curiosity at best, an inconvenience at worst. Their potential had been acknowledged, but not truly feared. That illusion was gone now. A representative from the Kvari Dominion, a species known for its powerful economic influence, finally spoke. And what happens now? Carter's lips twitched slightly. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything at all. Nothing. The answer sent another wave of uncertainty through the room. The Kvari's wings fluttered in agitation. You destroy an empire and claim that nothing will happen? Carter shrugged. We did what was necessary. We have no interest in expansion. No need for tribute. No desire for conquest. She let that settle before continuing. We are not here to rule the galaxy. But we will exist in it. Without threats. Without ultimatums. Without being treated like a species that needs to earn its place. Zaltar steepled his claws together. And if another species decides to test you? Carter's voice didn't change. They won't. No one in the chamber doubted her. A Hithri representative, his crystalline skin glimmering under the chamber lights, finally said what many were thinking. You are asking us to live with the knowledge that a species exists that can destroy anyone it chooses. That is not peace, Ambassador Carter. That is something else entirely. Carter nodded. Maybe. Her tone remained even. Or maybe it's just a reminder. The Hithri's gaze narrowed. Of what? Carter finally smiled, but there was no warmth in it. To never make the same mistake the Zorzel did? The meeting ended shortly after. No resolutions were passed. No formal decisions were made. But as the human delegation left, every species in that chamber understood a simple, unshakable truth. The balance of power had not changed. It had simply been revealed. Word of the Zorzel's annihilation spread quickly, rippling through the galaxy like a shockwave. Empires, once confident in their power, now reconsidered their place in the new reality. Smaller civilizations whispered in fear, wondering if humanity would one day turn its gaze toward them. Even the oldest and most advanced species, the ones who had viewed themselves as the true architects of galactic order, were forced to acknowledge a disturbing truth. Humanity had rewritten the rules. There was no occupation, no expansion, no human warships patrolling conquered space. The Zorzel's former territories were left empty, their colonies abandoned, their military remnants shattered beyond repair. The humans had not replaced them. They had simply removed them. And that was what terrified the galaxy most. The species that had conquered, assimilated, and enslaved for millennia all shared the same fundamental belief. Wars ended with treaties, with new rulers, with shifting borders. Empires did not simply cease to exist. But the humans had not taken land. They had not asked for resources, demanded reparations, or even imposed their laws. They had acted with the precision of a surgeon and the finality of an executioner. That was not war. That was something else entirely. Even among humanity's allies, an unease settled in. The Galactic Council could issue no sanctions, pass no resolutions, impose no consequences. They had watched an empire be erased from existence and realized, with growing horror, that there had been nothing they could have done to stop it. 1,000 unspoken questions spread across the stars. Would humanity do this again? Would they remain peaceful as long as no one provoked them? Or had something been unleashed that could never be controlled? But in the months that followed, as tensions remained high, the galaxy witnessed something even more disturbing than humanity's war. Its absence. Trade routes with Earth remained open. Diplomatic meetings continued as scheduled. Human colonies went about their lives, unshaken by the destruction they had wrought. There were no celebrations. No boasts of superiority. No demands for respect. It was as if, to them, nothing had changed. They had done what they deemed necessary, and now they moved forward. To the warlike species of the galaxy, this was incomprehensible. Conflict had always been followed by dominance. Victors did not simply return to their lives as if nothing had happened. And yet humanity had. This left the rest of the galaxy in a state of quiet, restless paranoia. No one dared challenge them, but neither did anyone truly understand them. They had been underestimated once, and the result was carved into the ruins of the Zorzel homeworld. Now, every empire, every species, every warlord faced the same question. What if humanity did decide to conquer? If they had wanted to expand, what could possibly stop them? The most powerful militaries in existence had analyzed the battle reports. They had studied the precision, the efficiency, the sheer control with which humanity had dismantled the Zorzel. And no matter how they ran the simulations, the conclusion remained the same. There was no defense. The thought festered in the minds of rulers and strategists alike. The understanding that the most dangerous species in the galaxy was not the one that boasted of its power. Not the one that sought conquest. It was the one that did not need to. The years passed, and the fear never truly faded. But humanity never struck again. No new wars followed. No more warnings were issued. But the message had been sent. And no one would ever forget it.